I'm Anne Emery. You're watching DataViz on the Go, the series where you learn DataViz time savers inside everyday software like Excel. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you this before and after makeover. You're going to learn about DataViz best practices and principles and planning and strategy, as well as some very practical Excel how-tos. These skills really go hand in hand. You're going to need both to do your projects better. So let's get into it, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this project and what you need to do to really bring the numbers to life and make them really clear for your audience. All right, first up, let me show you a little bit more about this data set, this is a real data set, but not. Okay, these are nobody's real years or real numbers or real groups, but it was inspired by a question that I got from a researcher in one of my online courses. So she did have a bunch of years. She did have an overall number for everybody and breakouts by 3 different demographic groups. And the numbers were quite small. They were in this realm because she was looking at the number of infants per 100,000 that were born with a certain condition. So that's pretty standard in a lot of health projects. People will look at how many infants out of 100 have such and such, or out of 1,000, or out of 10,000, or out of 100,000. So this, if you're not familiar with that lingo, this is 9.3 kids out of 100,000 were born with the XYZ condition that we're looking at, okay? Now, if you're brand new to DataViz, brand new to Excel, it's very tempting just to highlight this table and go to Insert and just grab this very first chart right here, which is a hot mess and terrible to look at. I think you know that right away. That's why it's our before version that we're making over. I mean, look at this one. It's like, do you look at purple and then your eyes have to ignore blue and green and fuchsia and you have to look at this other purple? Or do you look at green? That definitely stands out as being taller, but then do the blues get lost and are things going up or down? And it's just way too much going on. This is not the researcher's fault. It's not a fault of the study or the numbers. It's just that clustered bar charts and clustered column charts are the worst charts in the world. They're my least favorite charts in the world. The researcher knew that. She had already gone a couple more steps in her editing process. Oh, I should mention too, because these are patterns over time, it's also very tempting to highlight this table, go to Insert, and just try a line chart, but then you get a spaghetti line chart with all the lines crisscrossing and zigzagging and being all tangled up, and that's not much better either. These are terrible chart options, which is why there are before versions that we're going to improve upon. Okay, the first thing that the researcher had already tried, which is very standard in her field, is she calculated 3-year rolling averages. If you're new to this, don't overthink it. It just means that sometimes the numbers are so zigzaggy that it's noise and it's distracting. So you just do a simple average of a few years. In some industries, 3-year averages are pretty common, or 3-month rolling averages. In other industries I've worked in, 5-year rolling averages are pretty standard. In a lot of workplaces, these types of averages are pretty standard. And as long as you label them, almost everybody in your audience is going to be used to looking at things like this too. So the researcher already tried that, but we're still left with a clustered column chart. She had also already gone one step further, knowing that this is instructor Anne Emery's least favorite chart of all time. She had already tried small multiples, where don't overthink how to make this either, okay? How you make this is you literally start with your messy chart, and then I'll just copy and paste it so you can see these next to each other. If you click in the white area in the middle of the chart, like see right here, not on a column, not on a grid line, just in the plain old white background area, you right click and then you go to select data and you just use the check boxes, right? So you just say, okay, well, I'm going to make the overall one first. Okay. And then you format that one and then you copy and you paste and you right click in the center of the chart again, you go to select data again, and then you make the one for group A, okay? So you're not making 4 charts from scratch. Who's got time for that, right? You make one chart, you format it fully. These are not formatted at all. And then copy paste, change the checkbox, copy paste, change the checkbox. That's pretty quick, right? Pretty quick. But I try to avoid having four different charts if I can. If I know I just talked about how small multiples are so cool, but there's an even easier way to make that in Excel, I think, which is just making one chart, not four. This is not formatted. I'm gonna format it to try to sell you on this idea, but let me show you some of the behind the scenes clicks in case you wanna try this one chart idea, okay? So you can see right away the way these tables are formatted differently. We've got a bunch of columns, right? And just a few entries here for years. So it's like it's a wide, right? It's like wider in the table. And down here, you just do some copying and pasting and you make it really, really, really long, okay? So all these from start to finish, they're gonna feed across your chart. And if you want the words to appear under the chart, you can. You can have that like a category, a kind of subcategory labels on your X or Y axes. Okay, so to add this, you just, you highlight your table, whole thing. Whoops, not that far. This far. And you go to insert and you insert this chart and it's just one chart, okay? With the categories down here. So this is not formatted, but this is the idea of one chart is that your table is long, 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 long. Or transposed like this. It can also be wide, 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 wide. Same thing, you'll get the same chart in the end. Let me format this a little bit more and show you what it could look like. It could look like this. Let me zoom out so you can see this one, and I'll talk to you about some of the how-tos here. It would look like, there it is. Can you see it? I was sizing this for a PowerPoint slide for her. In PowerPoint, it would look like that, fully formatted, okay? This is one single chart behind the scenes. It is still a long list of all of the years, and the spacing between the rows in the table like this, that makes a spacing right here. So they're not all smushy, right? Look at this one smushy, and then if you add a space, an empty row to the table, that's where you get the space in the chart. I've got tons of other YouTube tutorials and blog posts showing this technique, so hopefully you've seen it before. Okay, here's another space. Here's another space. Are you starting to see how the grouping now is way easier to see thanks to that space? I think it's way more clear already. Another thing you can do with these is sometimes if you add a few spaces here, do you see how this overall word, it's centered, but like not in the right spot? Wouldn't you want this word overall to be below the numbers, not over here? I learned this technique years ago by reading some help forum or something. You have to kind of like put pretend content in these cells. Here's what I mean by putting pretend content. It's like a helper cell. You're going to put a space bar in there. So it looks empty, but as far as Excel is concerned, it actually has something in it. It's gonna go like this. You're not gonna see me doing it, but imagine I'm on my keyboard, right? Well, I'll show you. I'll do it. Just press the space and then enter. And do you see how the label just moved over, right? Now it's centered here. By the time you remove that gray line, like this, it's gonna look nice and tidy and not like weirdly spaced. Space, enter, space, enter. Okay. And would you have to do one down here? No, you wouldn't have to do space enter down here because I don't think the chart includes that one. Nope. Okay. So that's the gist of it. You can make small multiples in separate charts or in one chart, which I promise you at the end of the day does end up being less clicking. You're not having to adjust a bunch of scales, like you're able to do things in one fell swoop a little bit easier. Another thing I had to do editing wise was fix all these years, which the researcher was asking about a lot. She's like, how do I even fit this? How am I going to fit these years? She was trying to avoid the vertical text, which takes, longer to read. And of course, she didn't want to shrink down the font size to that because, like, obviously, I don't think I need to talk to you about why that's not going to work and it's going to be totally unreadable. So one thing I tried was I left the 4-digit year just at the very beginning, and then I did 2-digit abbreviations. I used the good old Alt Enter trick, like this, Alt Enter, to force a line break to give these labels a little bit more breathing room. They're horizontal, they're larger, but I'm still not happy with these. I think they're still a little bit too smushy, okay? See, even on this one, it's like, I'm not a fan of that. This is still a little bit smushy here. This is all smushy down here. I wasn't sure whether to, like, where to put this. Should it be centered on the slide? Should it be centered under here? It just looks all off, doesn't it? I don't know. This is still pretty unreadable, and it's not even that big. I usually aim for size 18 in slideshows, and it's still not fitting, okay? So this has gotten us most of the way there, but I'm going to show you one final iteration, and hopefully you'll like it. It's the version you saw at the very, very beginning of this lesson, which is this one. Patterns over time could be column charts, but they can also just be line charts. And instead of needing 4, this way we only really need 2. Overall is its own group. And then the subgroup breakouts are their own group. It's just 2 categories of information rather than 4. I tried this one because I wanted to have just one kind of takeaway message per chart. I thought that would be more clear than having tons and tons. And I also just wanted more space down here. Look at all that breathing room. You could even bump up the font size and it would still be good. You'd still be set. We just have to make a little bit more space right here. You could even put the 4-digit years for all of them, like 2019 instead of just 19. We've got more space available. Are you liking this one or am I the only one? You tell me. If you like this one, in Excel, it looks like this, okay? Very similar setup, sort of. The behind the scenes magic for this one is you still have a bunch of columns overall and the 3 groups, but you leave a lot of white space here. Okay, then you get 4 different lines. Do you see how this line then can be its own color and have its own formatting because it's just the overall numbers and their own column that simply don't extend that full way. I mean, if you wanted to extend them, this is obvious, right? Like what would happen? Just put in some placeholder numbers. It keeps going, right? But because those cells are empty, no space bar, no 0, nothing, they're fully empty, the line just stops as it's supposed to. You leave a natural break so you can see that it's 2 different groups of information, and then these pick up. But because they're now on the same chart, there's more space for all of the words that we need and all the text boxes and takeaways. What do you think? I don't know. This one's not terrible either. As long as you don't do our before version, the clustered column chart, I'm gonna be happy. Okay, so comment below this video as usual. Let me know which version did you like and why. Is there some additional after version that I'm missing? Maybe. There's probably multiple correct ways to do this. Do you have any Excel questions for me? Comment, I'll answer as many as I can.